What is up, guys? It is your favorite host, Christopher Renne from Pints at the Round Table, The Chris Renne Show, and Chris R Talks on YouTube. Thanks for listening and thanks for engaging with me online. It's much appreciated, and I love all of your feedback. Make sure you follow me and the page online, on Instagram at Chris Renne MB and Twitter at Chris Renne MB. And then follow M-Basement Prod on Twitter and Instagram at M-Basement Prod, and like us on Facebook at Mom's Basement Productions. Thank you and enjoy the show. What is up, gang? This is the second part of the two-part episode of the Chris Renne Show. Today, on this episode, we are getting into some other shenanigans that weren't included in the NBA Finals show. So if you want to hear about my NBA Finals talk with Game 5 and Game 6, go listen to the episode published before this one, the NBA Finals preview, and an NBA Finals review. It's the Chris Renne Show NBA Finals episode. Go listen to that. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Chris Renne MB, and don't forget to follow the Mom's Basement Productions account on Twitter and Instagram at MBasementProd. If you haven't yet listened to our episode of Pints at the Round Table, episode, I want to say 25. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But just go listen to that show. It's a good show. It's a fun show. We're just a group of guys having fun. It's a lot different than this one where you just have to listen to me talk, and I try to stimulate you and your mind for over an hour. And I'm sorry if that came off as weird, but it actually is kind of a little funny for me to say that. So let's get right into it. I want this to be a quick show. I want both my shows to equal about an hour in time. So the women's national team of the United States of America did something the men's team couldn't fathom of dreaming of. The last two times the men's team have been on a soccer field, they've lost by a combined 5 goals and put up a big fat 0. Over the last 3 tournaments the U.S. men's national team have been in, they've scored, I think 12 goals was the stat I saw. And guess what the women's national team did against Thailand? A small Asian country, for those of you who don't know. Thailand is a team that isn't filled with world-class women's soccer players and tend to have quite a few amateurs on their roster who are playing the sport because they were the best in their country, rather than the United States, who have some of the best women in the world. So if you're hearing me talk about the best women in the world versus a bunch of amateurs, I'm guessing you can see how this went. The women's national team absolutely obliterated Thailand 13-0. And the talk of the town is how the women's national team kept celebrating goal after goal. Well, it's the World Cup. It's the highest of the high. It's the pinnacle of the sport. And yes, I talk about pinnacles of sports all the time. And that's because they're important. They mean a lot. And if you're going to field a team with amateurs, you deserve the best to put you back into your place until you get better. When you look at the history of the Women's World Cup, and I'm going to type in Women's World Cup history to see what comes up. It's not an old tournament. It's not an old famous tournament, as I should say. You look at it, it was started in 1991. It's not new. So, it's pretty new but the first instance of a Women's World Cup dates back to 1970, with the first international tournament taking place in Italy throughout July 1970. Well, when you look at the host countries, one happened in China, one happened in Sweden, 2 in the United States, another in China, 1 in Germany, and then the most recent one prior to the one this year was the 2015 World Cup in Canada. This one's taking place in Paris, France, for those of you who don't know. So let's see. The United States has won it 3 times. Germany twice, Norway once, Japan once. So it's been dominated by first world countries and countries with a lot of backing in sports and money everywhere. When you look at some of the great players around the world, a lot of them come from soccer countries. You look at arguably one of the best women's player of all time, Marta, who's playing in her 5th. She's from Brazil. You look at Abby Wambach, who's retired. She scored 14. This isn't new. Teams dominating this, a lot of people compared us to Canada, and said if Canada was playing Thailand and it was 13-0, they wouldn't have rubbed it in and celebrated. Well, you Canadians booed when Kevin Durant hurt his leg because you guys thought that's going to win us the championship. That was selfish. And you know what? I have it written down here, and I'm a little impassioned and brazened right now because I just did my finals talk show, and I'm all juiced up on Duncan because this show runs on Duncan. So, I was thinking, there's no mercy rule at the World Cup. So why are people complaining? I get it. They're celebrating. You know what I'd celebrate? If I scored 5 goals in anything, I'd celebrate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh my God, she can count to 5. That's amazing. Why are people so offended by that? I thought we went the best from our women, right? In this country. The Women's World Cup is a chance for us to show all the world that we're just better than people. That our country is better. And I know it's sports, and I know there's a lot of other ways to compare which country's better. And that might have came off as an egotistical American. But when I have fellow American compatriots complaining about us winning 13-0, a guy named Stuart Holden, a guy who had like 6 caps on the U.S. national team, is absolutely attacking these women for scoring 13. It's the World Cup. Alex Morgan scored 5. Should she have celebrated that 5th one? That was the 12th goal of the game. Maybe not as much as the first one, but it's the World Cup. When Mallory Pugh scores her first goal, it should be exciting. When these women score their first goal of a World Cup, it should be exciting. They should celebrate. And if you're Thailand and you don't like them celebrating, you should stop some goals. Plain and simple. I've played goalie. It's not easy. In intramurals, it's not easy. So I understand the pain the goalie went through. I understand the pain the other players went to. But sometimes you're just outmatched, and that's okay. I honestly, personally, would rather have a team dominate and celebrate than dominate and feel bad for me. And I think that is the approach that they should have taken. I think celebrating is better. It's not like they were going and attacking these Thailand players. It's not like they're running past their bench taunting them. It wasn't like anything horrific happened. They just lost 13-0. It's a soccer game. They're just probably happy to be there. But, there's a goal differential rule. I don't think the U.S. is going to miss the beat on that. But one last point on this. If the United States had gotten beaten by that by anybody, it doesn't even matter if it's Thailand. If they got beaten 13-0, the world would rejoice and expect everyone to be celebrating every single one of those goals. So that's another reason I'm not mad. Because at the end of the day, when America loses, everyone cheers. But when America dominates like they should, people boo us for celebrating. And you know what? I hope we score 13 goals on everyone and celebrate every single one of them. I want the United States to score 150 goals in this tournament. I know it's not possible. But after all this hate these women got, I would own it. And I would score as many goals as I can. They already have a target on their back. What's the point of being nice, at the end of the day? So I still think they're my prediction to win the World Cup. I think them winning 13-0 definitely paints that picture a little bit more clearer for those of you who don't pay attention to women's sports like I do. The WNBA started. Why don't some of you people check that out? All right. So moving on to another sport I'm very passionate about that isn't women's soccer. The NCAA transfer portal has been amazing for people like me who like to talk about stuff. And I think this show is going to end up being kind of free agent heavy. So today I'm going to start with some players who I think will make the biggest difference in 2019. To start, I think the two easy ones are Justin Fields and Jalen Hurts. They're coming into rosters that have instant college football playoff potential. Ryan Day's a new coach. Lincoln Riley's still a pretty young coach that's been there, hasn't won it. I think those two are pretty straightforward answers for this question. Honestly, I think there's a lot of schools who have quarterbacks going in. You look at Tate Martell, he can make a huge difference. You look at Brandon Wimbush at Central Florida. Then you even go deeper and look at DeAndre Francois at Florida Atlantic University. There's quarterbacks that have transferred everywhere for every reason in any direction, And then I think Austin Kendall is going to be one of the best transfer portal signings from West Virginia. I think he can make a big difference. I think it's been an interesting conversation to have, the way these quarterbacks have started using the transfer portal as free agency. Once it starts getting closer to college football season and I start doing more predominantly college football shows, I'll probably talk about one of these types of things each week. I'm intrigued by it. I know a lot of people are. 24/7 Sports has dedicated a whole team to monitoring the transfer portal from each school, and that's pretty amazing to me that they've done that. The last one I think can make a huge difference is Jalen Phillips, who transfers from UCLA to Miami. He was an insanely talented recruit out of high school. One of those guys who had offers from almost everywhere, chose to go to UCLA. That hasn't really panned out so far, and with Chip Kelly trying to make that team way younger, Jalen Phillips wanted to find instant success and another place where he could find some spotlight and traction before he declared for the NFL draft, and I think next year would be the year. His transfer hasn't been declared immediate eligible yet, and he may not be, but when he does get to play, I think his difference will be felt on that defensive side of the ball because he's a really talented player. Once Inland Empire, if you listen to the last show, he's got that Inland Empire sort of deal too. So now that we've talked about the players who are going to make the biggest difference in 2019 to me, let's talk about some of the mysteries of the transfer portal. When I was reading my Athlon sports catalog and my Phil Steele's college sports catalog and my Street and Smith stuff, I noticed that a lot of teams have a lot of transfer players coming in who are going to play significant roles on these new squads. But most schools seem to be benefiting from it. Then I looked at the Big Ten transfer portal numbers, and Penn State has had 20 kids enter the transfer portal this year. And Michigan has 15. That's 35 players combined for two of the best Big Ten schools. And James Franklin has been known to sort of wear on people, and so is Jim Harbaugh. And I know that it's probably not their fault these players are transferring, but I think it's something to look into. And I think you look at Julian Fleming committing to Ohio State. A lot of players, the Ohio State Buckeyes just got an offensive lineman to flip his commitment to Penn State to Ohio State. Michigan isn't recruiting at the same level they have been, and now they have 15 players wanting to leave. A couple quarterbacks and then some other position players who haven't really seen the field, but still, I think it's a big deal, and I think it's telling of cultures when teams leave. When you look at an Ohio State, which has an extremely competitive culture as well, but they only had 6 guys enter, 3 of which were quarterbacks. So I think that really says a lot about the team, and I think that really shows the difference in cultures, and I think a lot of people at Ohio State believe that Ryan Day is going to win for years to come and that Penn State and Michigan aren't the places to be. The next mystery of the transfer portal. This guy named Brew McCoy was an early enrollee at USC, an ultra-talented player, signed there because of Cliff Kingsbury. Cliff Kingsbury then goes on to become the head coach of The Arizona Cardinals, that's my bad. Blanked on that for a second, don't know why. So then he decides he doesn't want to play for the new offensive coordinator. He felt lied to by Cliff Kingsbury. So he ends up transferring to Texas, gets immediate eligibility. They grant him it. He's probably going to play as a freshman. He's that talented of an athlete and a player. Then he realizes that it's going to cost his mom a lot of money to come watch him play. And he has some issues at Texas, and he decides to transfer back to USC after declaring a hardship waiver to transfer to Texas. I think that sets a terrible precedent for the transfer portal, and you're going to know why in a second when I tell you another story of the transfer portal. But Brew McCoy's kind of, I think, what I grasp from him, and I don't know the kid personally, and I don't want people to just hate this guy for his choices he made, because I don't even understand the pressure of signing to a college. I went to junior college for 2 years, then I got into Ohio State, and there was really no choice. I wasn't betting my life on playing a sport for someone, so it's interesting. It's really interesting, though, that he ended up back at the school he declared his hardship waiver to get away from. I think that's telling of what this means, and I think a lot of you are going to get angry after I tell you this next story of a person who wanted to transfer from a school but was denied eligibility and had a legitimate reason. It wasn't due to playing time. It wasn't due to that. The guy played in 9 games. Luke Ford, the tight end for the Georgia Bulldogs. He was a freshman tight end. He played in 9 games. So he's got plenty of time and plenty of eligibility left since they denied his transfer eligibility. So the story goes, Luke Ford is very close with his grandfather, and his grandfather has been very sick, and he doesn't want to be away from him, and he's from Illinois, his home state. So when it comes to that hardship of locality and needing to be close to home and that proximity to home hardship for a sickness or something, he should be clear. But since it was his grandfather and not technically his immediate family, it was not a legitimate enough reason for him to go back to Illinois and play for the Fighting Illini. So he's now going to have to sit out a year. When USC gets a recruit who's never played a down, signs to a school, quits because a coach leaves, and that gets a hardship waiver. It's similar to Tate Martell's hardship waiver, where Tate Martell said the drama that surrounded Urban Meyer and Zach Smith was the reason he felt uncomfortable and had to leave. Wasn't the fact that another quarterback who also got a hardship waiver for a baseball player calling him the N-word and making him feel uncomfortable at his own school left. Now, the interesting part about Justin Fields is his sister's still attending Georgia. So, I mean, obviously I don't know what it feels like to be called that, and I think it's still a reason to leave a place. But I do think it's a little weird that his sister still chose to attend that school. I'm not his sister. I didn't make the choice. I am happy Justin Fields is an Ohio State Buckeye, so I'm not complaining. But you look at Brew McCoy and you look at Luke Ford's cases, and you look at a lot of these quarterbacks who have been granted immediate eligibility. Obviously, a graduate transfer is going to get immediate eligibility, so I'm not talking about those guys. But Luke Ford had legitimate reasons, and you get Brew McCoy, a guy who's never played, and you have a guy who's played 9 games and played quite a bit for a freshman, who legitimately needs to go home, and he's denied a transfer appeal. And there was another offensive lineman, and I wish I remembered his name, but Virginia Tech was too far out of the radius for a proximity to home move that he wasn't allowed to go to Virginia Tech and play. So he had to remain at the school that he wanted to get away from. I think that sort of makes me a little sick. So I think they need to revamp this. I think they need to find a better way to do this. I think there's so much that goes into the transfer portal now, and it's such a new thing, and it's such an easy way for people to find it. And I now see these recruiting services throwing resources at it. So it's a thing that's here to stay, but it's definitely something that needs to be regulated better. The appeals process has to be more consistent and more fair and more painted towards. And they say every appeal is different, and every appeal is different. But I think sick family member trumps anything in that nature. So we'll move forward. Miami is another mystery of the transfer portal. So Miami has really used it to solidify their roster. Just some names to give you. Tate Martell, Ohio State University, former 4-star dual-threat quarterback. Asa Martin, former 4-star running back. Bubba Bolden, former 5-star defensive back recruit, I think. I think he was an athlete out of school. And then next on the list is KJ Osborne from Buffalo, who was a 2-star recruit out of high school, goes and has one of the best years in, I want to say, the MAC conference. Yeah, that's right. And ends up transferring to the University of Miami. So they have really solidified up their roster, and if Jalen Phillips ends up getting immediate eligibility, like a lot of people are assuming, I think Miami will really actually end up being a front runner in that ACC Coastal Division. I really think that division's wide open for anyone right now, and I think when you look at roster by roster breakdown, which I'm gonna give you all written once the season gets closer with my college football previews on the Mom's Basement Sports blog coming to you this fall. I'll be doing a week by week college football column. That's why I'm doing all this research with all the college football preview magazines. I might add an NFL one, which will be a little bit shorter, but I'm really excited to start getting to work on that project. It's gonna definitely start with just the basic name stuff, players that can make a difference. Then as camp comes, I'm going to start coming up with some storylines to look out for. You know, it's going to be my first attempt getting into written media. I think the transfer portal is going to keep growing, and I think players, you know, it's an advantage to them. It's a good way for them to find new places, and you get a certain amount of time in the transfer portal before your scholarship's revoked. And I think it's just a good way to test the waters. I think it's a good way for players to have a little bit of freedom that they never really felt like they had in the first place. So I actually am pro transfer portal. I think they need to, like I said, solidify the rules of appeals. I think there should be different reasons, and I think if you're going to transfer, say, from Georgia, a national title contender, to Illinois, I think you're only going to do that for the right reasons. So that was an interesting. I'm going to continue with some stories, some crazy stories, leading up to college football season. As the NBA ends, I'm going to start transitioning to the NFL again and to college football with the occasional baseball story. So now we're going to talk some NBA free agency news that's happened. I'm just going to start with the Los Angeles Lakers because that's what everyone wants to hear about. So Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN reported that the Lakers are the front runner to land AD in a trade package. Right now, the two offers they fielded are Lonzo Kuzma Harden first rounder and then Lonzo Kuzma Ingram and first rounder. Everyone I know who is a Lakers fan says, hey, don't get rid of Kuz, man. He's going to develop into a really good player, I swear. Yeah. You know, when you're a developmental player, that's usually when you're like 20, 21, 22. Kyle Kuzma is going to be 24 this year. Anthony Davis is currently 26. He's going to be 27 of this coming season. That age is a lot closer than I'd want it to be for that. Everyone says Kyle Kuzma is going to have this miraculously high ceiling, and that's just not true. He's going to become more consistent. He'll probably shoot the ball a little better. But what we're seeing from Kyle Kuzma is all Kyle Kuzma is going to be. And that's just a fact. Then you see the other people in this trade. Lonzo struggled to stay healthy. If he hadn't struggled to stay healthy, this trade would be done. Lonzo's been an insane player when you look at advanced statistics and plus-minus stats. He's one of the best in the league when it comes to those. Brandon Ingram's been a little inconsistent, but last year around the end when he was healthy before the arm injury, he was playing unbelievable basketball. You really got to give him credit when it is. Now, when it looks at Josh Hart's a very valuable asset to a lot of teams. But with that being said, he's very tradable as well because it's not hard to find a Bulldog defender who can shoot the three, who can handle the ball a little. There is so many people in the league like that. You look at one of them on Toronto and Fred VanVleet, and he's not leaving, but I'm just saying there's tons of examples of that. You got players like, just those typical gritty backup point guards. Not too special, nothing great. That's what Josh Hart's always going to be. The one advantage Josh Hart has is he can play the 2 and the 1. So I think losing that's a little different. But what are you really losing with those guys that you can't replace with some cheap free agents or some veteran players in trades and stuff that you aren't getting in Anthony Davis? Anthony Davis is a 25 and 10 caliber guy on averaging. He's one of the best players in the NBA. He's one of the most talented players in the NBA, and he's been a little banged up in his career. But he's shown he could lead a team to the playoffs. I'd very much compare Anthony Davis to Kevin Love before Kevin Love joined LeBron. And Anthony Davis is significantly more talented when it comes to athleticism, when it comes to skills than Kevin Love. And I love Kevin Love. But Anthony Davis, from a defensive standpoint, dwarfs him. So it's not much of a comparison, but I'm saying, it's the difference is Anthony Davis has led a team to a playoff. I'd say Anthony Davis is I don't know how I'd put him if they get another scorer. Say Jimmy Butler ends up coming to Los Angeles, the Lakers in free agency. I don't really see Anthony Davis being the number 2 option with LeBron. But if they get, say, 2 or 3 guys that aren't as good as Anthony Davis instead, which I think they should do for depth purposes, Anthony Davis is fully capable. I mean, he's led a team to the playoffs. Like I said, it's not like you're trading these guys who have proven to be a playoff caliber team. They were a playoff caliber team with LeBron, but LeBron himself is a playoff caliber team. I think Anthony Davis needs to be a Laker for LeBron. I can't stand here and watch LeBron waste away his twilight years of his career. It's just not something I want to do. They say there's a secret team in trade talks with the Pelicans. Don't let anyone fool you. That's the Boston Celtics. They are throwing in offers to add another suitor. And that's why Rich Paul had to come out and say, if you're not the Los Angeles Lakers or in Los Angeles, expect him to only be there for 1 year. That kind of takes away from what the Celtics would be willing to offer, what the Knicks would be willing to offer. I don't think the Knicks have the players to create a package for Anthony Davis. I think the Celtics do, but I don't think Anthony Davis really wants to play in Boston. I think the rumors out that playing for Brad Stevens, if you're a star player, is tough. I don't think Kyrie liked it very much. So, at the end of the day, I think Anthony Davis is going to end up being a Laker. It's just going to be about mostly what it's going to cost. So, now that we know the Anthony Davis deal of the week, we will continue on some free agents. Kyrie Irving said he is opting out. What's that mean? It means he's not going back to Boston. And there's 3 options for him. There's the Brooklyn Nets, the New York Knicks, and the Los Angeles Lakers. Those 3 teams I can see him going to. The Brooklyn Nets have an innate advantage because Kyrie Irving grew up a Nets fan. It's closest to home for him, so is the New York Knicks. He's from New Jersey. I think he wants to be home. I think he wants to be in Brooklyn. I think he wants to be in New York. I don't think it's a great path for him when it comes to winning, in all honesty. The Knicks have become the favorite to land, or the Nets have become the favorite to land him in Brooklyn. Kyrie Irving's left the CPA group, that agency group, and he is now with the Rock Nation Sports, and that is owned by Jay-Z, who is a part owner of the Brooklyn Nets. So I think there's some insider trading sort of deal going on there. He's probably the biggest enigma, I'd say, of all the free agents. You know, he says he's going to do this, but, you know, he said he wanted to go to Boston and lead a team. He never had the choice in that one. They traded him to Boston because that would get the best package to the Cleveland Cavaliers. You look at all the teams that have the money. I think there's quite a few options that would fit Kyrie Irving better. But in reality, you don't know what that guy's going to do. He had a golden ticket with LeBron James. If he just stayed one more year, guess what? That Cavs team would, be playing for another championship, and they would have already closed out the series. Hypothetically. So now, the next point guard I'm going to talk about is Kemba Walker, and he said he'd take less than Supermax money to stay. I think Kemba Walker wants to win. I think he wants to get paid. But in reality, he knows if he takes that Supermax contract, it's going to be hard to get help to Charlotte. He knows they're going to have to fill out their roster with veteran players and players that cost a little bit more money to create a more balanced team so they can compete for a playoff spot and get more competitive when it comes to the playoffs. I think Kemba Walker is really good. He was on my fantasy basketball team. He was one of my better players. I missed the draft, so my team wasn't the greatest. But I think that's interesting that he take less than Supermax money. Getting a 5-year, $230 million contract is absurd, and I don't know how anyone in the world could fathom turning that down. But I could kind of understand it in a way. If you want to win more than you care about getting paid, I think that's an interesting dynamic that can change sort of the outlook of the league and how people feel about the Supermax contract. I honestly think going into the collective bargaining agreement in 2 years, that new discussion, that's not going to be a good look if players aren't taking that Supermax, because it's going to be hard to argue that you deserve to be paid more when people are voluntarily taking less money to get better players. And, I mean, there's a reason you got the Supermax deal the way it was. It's because players were taking max contracts because they had to. Because, it's what you did. And now if people start turning it down, they're going to lower the max. And there's going to be harder stipulations to get a Supermax. And I just think for the rest of your brethren, Kemba Walker, you need to take the Supermax, or else the owners are going to abuse the players once again in business meetings, get their way, and everything except a few things, and the players are going to be unhappy again for another 5 to 10 years. It's cyclical. It happens every single time. And then every single time the players find something new to be mad about that they could have argued for the 5 years before. All right, next, Kevin Durant, Achilles injury. I already talked about that on the show, so I'm just saying a lot of reports are saying he's going to take the player option, push free agency back another year. I think that'll be the easiest way for him to recover. There's no pressure. Signing in free agency with a torn Achilles and recovering is going to be a struggle. You stay where you're comfortable. You take the money. They owe you that money. They didn't force you to play, but everyone seemed to force him to play. So I just kind of think it's the best option. I think if you're not going to play next season, you just sit, you take the money, you don't put any pressure on a new team, and you just decide in free agency next year if what the Warriors did to help you is enough for you to stay or go. I don't think Knicks fans are worried that they're going to find someone else. I think Knicks fans are a little depressed they won't get you this year, but it's all about health with him. So there's that for Kevin Durant. Now, Jimmy Butler, interesting case, wants to be in New York with Durant or Kyrie, but don't rule out the Los Angeles Lakers. I think LeBron's been reaching out to players. I think he's been talking to a lot of players. I think Jimmy Butler's a guy who's smarter than people give him credit for. I think he's played with Karl Anthony Towns. He's played with Andrew Wiggins. He's played with Embiid. He's played with Ben Simmons. He's played with the young guys. And the guy realizes that being a number one in the league's hard. And it's even harder when you feel like you're better than the players you're playing with. And that's what Jimmy Butler does. But you come and you play with LeBron, you're going to have your nights because LeBron's not going to want to be the guy every night. He's too old for it. You're going to be in LA, which is going to be the most valuable market you've ever played in. You're going to be extremely competitive as long as LeBron stays healthy. And there's a good chance you're not only playing with LeBron, but you're also playing with Anthony Davis. And that is legitimately a big three that can dominate. You got two absolute all-NBA caliber defensive players, a former all-NBA caliber defensive player in LeBron, and three all-NBA caliber players. That's all you need, and they'll fill out the bench with depth and stuff. That's not something I'm worried about. I don't think that's something anyone should be worried about. If Rob Pelinka blows this deal with Anthony Davis, he probably won't get any free agents, and I think it's a bold move for Jeanie Buss to trust him. But I think Jimmy Butler is a lot like Kyrie. It's going to be an enigma. You don't really know what he wants to do. If Kevin Durant was going to the Knicks, I think I can guarantee that Butler would go. But now that Kevin Durant's not leaving, I don't know what he's going to do. I don't think the Sixers are going to offer him a supermax. Not a chance. Brooklyn's an interesting place. I think a team with D'Angelo Russell, Kyrie Irving, and Jimmy Butler can score a lot of points. I think it'll struggle to defend. So don't rule out the Lakers. I think Jimmy Butler's smarter than a lot of people give him credit for. I think he's made some erratic decisions before, but I really think signing with the Lakers could be the best option for him. Play with LeBron. Then lastly, I'm going to close out the show with some smaller free agents to watch. Their free agencies can really actually change the shape of the league. The first one's Chris Middleton. He's one of the better two-way 3-and-D type of guys in the NBA. You saw him in the playoffs. You saw him put on in some really big moments. He's going to be a max contract level player because of the versatility and value he brings to the defensive end and the ability to knock down the three. He's a beautiful number 2 option. He plays the game fantastic. He's not a guy that causes problems in any ways. He's just a good team guy, and I think you got to watch him. And if you watch any contenders or want to be contenders make a move for a free agent, I think the Bucks should be really trying hard to keep him. I think the Lakers should be trying really hard to pursue him. I think if you're a team like the Mavericks, when you're going to have Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis, I think you want Chris Middleton to come in and be a leader. I think the Nets could use him. The Knicks could use him. I think there's a lot of teams that if they get a star, they can really use a solid number 2 option, much like Giannis did with him. And I think his free agency can really take shape of the league. And then you go to the Philadelphia 76ers with Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris is a max-level guy. He's talented. He's a 17, 8, and 6 type of dude. He's an all-around good basketball player. And in the league, you have to play a lot of money for those types of dudes. He kind of shrunk in some big moments in the playoffs, but I don't think a first experience should be the thing we rate a guy on for the rest of his career. I think Tobias Harris is a guy who can fit anywhere and find a role on any team with his outside shooting, his defensive versatility, his rebounding, his ability to guard 2 through 5. He's a very interesting piece. I could actually see Tobias Harris ending up back on the Clippers. I think that's an interesting thing to watch out for. The Clippers traded him, and they do have a ton of money to bring someone in. If Kawhi Leonard doesn't choose to go to the Clippers, I think Tobias Harris is a really good second choice for them. I think Tobias Harris will continue to improve And I think you look at the Clippers, you look at the Lakers, you look at the 76ers, they should really think about bringing him back. I think there's so many teams that could really value a guy like Tobias Harris because of his versatility. And then one guy no one's really talking about is a guy from the Indiana Pacers. He gave LeBron a real big run for his money on that Victor Oladipo team. And I think the Pacers are going to shell out some cash to keep him. But if he ends up hitting free agency, Bojan Bogdanovic is a type of guy who can stretch the floor. He can play defense in a lot of ways. I mean, he gave LeBron some trouble. I'm not saying LeBron didn't absolutely get buckets, but he's an athlete. He's tough. He scores. He's a decent passer. I really actually enjoy watching him play. He was a big part of that team making the playoffs this year, despite Victor Oladipo's injury. He's a tough dude, tough player. So honestly, any team, if he hits the free agent market, would be lucky to add Bojan Bogdanovic. So, yeah, honestly, quick show. Got some talking points in. Don't forget to listen to the NBA Finals show before the NBA Finals start. And also, don't forget to listen to this one. And if you've listened this far, don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at ChrisRennieMB. And don't forget to follow the Mom's Basement Productions pages at MBasementProd on Twitter and Instagram. And then like us on Facebook at Mom's Basement Prod. Thank you for listening. This is episode 47 of the Chris Renne Show. And this is your host, Christopher Renne, signing off.